Where is my, yes, it's there. It's okay?
Yeah, it's okay, Ligia.
Well, for you, it's already good evening. I'm very happy to be here. It's a pleasure to share with you our work. And this is part of a big project that is already funded by the Society for Research into Higher Education. Is a project on the politics, the policies. No, this is the name of my work, sorry. This work is part of a project. This is more important than the name. That is about the measuring of the relationship between institutional diversity and student equity in Latin America countries. We are studying not only Brazil, but also Argentina, Chile, Peru, and Uruguay. The focus in this presentation, which is part of a large project, this large project I mentioned, is focused only on the Brazilian agency to produce systematic information on the education system in all the levels in Brazil. So we are trying to, the project is the Sociology of Brazilian Science of Education, an institutional approach. Our proposal is to analyze the impact of the breakdown of institutional logics in the evaluation center system in the last Brazilian presidents on the forms of collaboration between, I changed my glasses, between researchers and policymakers. We have a privileged point of view because we've been working with INEP for the last 8 years. And so we try to, based on the sociology of science and the institutional agency approach, we try to analyze how the INEP, it's the National Institute for Pedagogical Studies, how its researchers resist their onslaughts of negationism and sought to support from the academic community in the area of education evaluation, trying to ensure, and I think they managed to, the resilience of institutional values. Some historical information that could allow for the comprehension of the story. Both the Brazilian Ministry of Education and other governmental research and evaluation institutions, such as INEP and CNPq, which is the National Council for Scientific and Technological Development. These are bureaucratic structures that have been well established first in 1937, the INEP, and 1951, the CNPq. For most of the time, including the period of the civil-military dictatorship between 1964 and 1985, there was an extensive cooperation between them and the academic community. Although conflicts and political disputes around education reforms and interventions were common throughout that period, they used to be based on models and perspectives guided by minimally scientific principles, therefore open to evidence-based argument and debate. The academic community participation in building the expansion policies for the Brazilian education system was quite expressive in such a framework. Examples would include policies for reducing illiteracy, improving learning in basic education. This began by the 1930s, so you can imagine for how long this cooperation is going on. Policies for higher education follow the same pattern, but they came later. In 1968, we get, in the case of the federal government, and not only by legislation forms, but in 1968, you get the university reform made by Newton Sucupira, which was a very important step forward in the system to improve science and so on, even with paradoxical effects, included the entry of women in an almost mass system. And also we had the quotas law in 2012, which expanded even more the system and the access for students from disadvantaged background. From the perspective of the communication between science and university in the construction of a kind of social legitimacy for university institutions and for the scientific practical, we have all this long period was we had many transformations in this relationship, but it is very important to call attention to this point that Schwartzman and Balbashevs are researching at this moment and have been researching for years, that the idea of a university in the Humboldtian model was for many people in Brazil, including those outside university, the model that would, how can I say, be accepted and can strengthen national innovation system and research system. But since the 1970s, we began to get a mass higher education system, and the research university segment is a minority, although it may be the predominant model and the ideal type for our system. But from the perspective of national innovation system, university research can play a greater or lesser role depending on the country's institutional model. And this is the central argument I will develop there. But the tendency now in Brazil is for the business sector and public institutions to have an important in Brazil. Those two sectors are not the same as they are working advanced systems. In Brazil, the Brazilian system of innovation, according to Schwartzman, was based on university scientific research that is in the stagnated, not only in Brazil, but in all Latin American countries. In the Brazil case, this could be explained by the paralysis of research system in the 1960s and 1970s. At the time, these parameters represented important advances and indicate a strong tendency to favor the modern scientific vision, guided mainly by agents from the fields of medicine and physics. But then we come to this strange thing that was the Bolsonaro shock. The long-standing comparison between bureaucratic structures established in Brazil to foster research and academic training and the academic community provides a case for understanding how such an institutional and social arrangement was able to withstand the attacks of an openly science denialist government. The Bolsonaro administration, I put the image of Plan Earth. I don't know how to say this in English, but I think it's easy to understand. The Bolsonaro administration has turned the Minister of Education into a circus. It was terrible, and we had their corrupt evangelical pastors and flat earther politicians tried to impose a conservative agenda of customs by weakening the school institution and alienating the academic community. How much time do I have yet?
Apologies, yeah, you still got about 10 minutes to present. I'm sorry.
10 minutes.
Yeah, no, sorry,
you've
got 5 minutes to present, and then we're into the questions. Sorry.
That's 5. My goodness.
Yep, so 5 minutes. Actually, you've got a 5-minute warning, Maria.
Well, okay. The INEP was created in 1937 to guide public policies in education. Its foundation took place in the context of renewal of the Brazilian state when the ministries of education and health were created. In 1962, INEP helped at the founder of the University of Brasilia, which was a new model of university that took place in Brazil. Then we have many important dates in the evolution of INEP, but I will call attention to 2003, when INEP became responsible for the operationalization of the National Higher Education Assessment System, SINAIS, under the coordination of the National Higher Education Assessment Commission, CONAIS, which acts in the strategic definition of the implementation of SINAIS. This commission is where the academic community can play a role important in INEP. I will not, I will just put this out and call attention that in the Bolsonaro government, all the technical directors of the institute, they were not fired. They go out. They stay just a technician, not as directors. And they created a movement to protect the NEP because the government tried to interfere in the technical arrangements to produce the ENEM, which was the biggest exam in Brazil, and used it as the point for transit to university, from secondary education to university. So just to give an idea, before Bolsonaro's government, 80 million students each year tried to enter the NEP. So now I will just read to be quick. The impact of higher education system on the scientific research production is important. To reduce NEP's resistance movement to a fight against scientific denialism would be naive. One must also consider the stagnation of the country's research and innovation system linked to the actual characteristics of the system in Brazil. The higher education system has diversified both within the public and private sectors. The private sector has created a broad, uneven range of professional vocational education schools. Postgraduate programs, mainly in the public sector, have taken on other functions, creating an additional segment of professional qualifications and degree, distinct, very much distinct from the research and innovation function that was previewed in the Humboldtian model. The specific difference that can be found in the systematic attack on all federal government bodies, not just on the institutions of the education system. It was a general assault on democratic values that in previous time allowed for divergence and collaboration between different political perspectives. The main direct reason in the case of NEP was deliberate interference against consolidated technical aspects and a lack of dialogue with civil servants. But this was not new, given the equivalent situations in previous governments. The core of the problem was attacking an institution organizing around the scientific values that have prevailed in Brazil since the 1930s. A group of values that, even under political disputes, even with the stagnation indicated by Schwartzman, ensured the existence of island of quality scientific production. INEP is one of those islands. Thank you, and sorry for being so so quick. I would just like to present the CELAPS, which is the Center, Latin America Center for Research into Higher Education, that was the result of funding from Society for Research into Higher Education and the Ministry of Science and Technology in Brazil. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria-Legia, and it's nice to see the impact of what SRHE's funding has been able to support to help to happen. So that's super to sort of kind of close the loop on that. So that's great. I had some curious questions for you. So if I can just take Chair's privilege and ask you a couple of curious questions, and then I'll turn over to Raphael and Anna to see if they've got questions as well. And excuse my ignorance, because I'm not familiar with the setup of the university system within Brazil. But are the universities are they state funded in Brazil, and therefore is there an expectation about kind of subjects or how things are delivered in terms of being able to sort of assure that particular political agendas or certain sectors are represented within the university system?
Well, the university and all the higher education system, of course, it's not an agent, a political agent and or party. It's not like that, of course. But as anywhere else, as everywhere else, we would find that the members of academic community have their preferences, their political values and attitudes. But what is rather impressive is that even in the dictatorship, we have many professors that were sent to jail and to exile, but there were also, they come back, and the ones that stayed there in Brazil continue to work together with those that would not support the torture of things like that, but support the economical development that the dictatorship could bring to Brazil. Of course, this was a problem. We have many debates, but there is a debate. The problem with the new government that there is no debate. They were planners. We say that, and so they say that university is a stupid place where you have nothing to do. So in this case, I think if you can find 2 or 3% of professors, both in public and the private sectors, that were Bolsonarists, the maximum is that, because he could not get legitimacy from this type of institutions. But this does not mean that you have not a new right organizing itself in Brazil, and it exists in the higher education system. Of course, this is normal, but we are talking of the normal right. So it's just that.
Thank you very much. Raphael, you wanted to come in.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Maria Ligia, for your presentation. I'm wondering. I'm not sure how to pose this question. I feel in your presentation an opposition between science and negationists or flat earthers. I don't know how to say that. It was really interesting. Flat earthers, right? And
Yeah.
I remembered I don't know if you watched the Netflix documentary about flat Earth. It was really, really interesting because they deny that Earth is round somehow.
Yes,
But they
including
use
the Ministry of Science and Technology, who was an astronaut. He was brought to the place just because he was an astronaut. So someone asked him in a TV show if he had seen the Earth plan, and he said, no, it's round.
but you know, in that documentary, they use a scientific method to prove their point. That was really interesting because they deny some commonsensical science-based idea. However, they use the method. So I wanted to ask you, is Bolsonaro regime accepting some kind of science or rejecting all science? What kind of science? I can imagine maybe more evidence-based, maybe this, what works, for example, very strong North American framework, maybe they accepted that kind of science. So to unpack this, do you think that it is certain types of science or science production of certain knowledge that is being attacked, or the whole scientific enterprise?
Yes, thank you for this question. For both, thank you, Andrea, also. But I think that Bolsonaro has not brain enough to distinguish among types of science. And many of his people who work with him, his functionaries, many of them were people who came from, for instance, Paulo Guedes, his Minister of Education, has studied in Chicago. He had a doctor as a Minister of Health. The problem is that when he noted that this doctor, in the times of the COVID pandemic, this doctor was acting in favor of vaccines, he fired the doctor, fired the second doctor, and then put a general in the place, a general who favored the bribing of and make it difficult to bring to Brazil the Pfizer vaccine, because they could not receive $1 per dose from Pfizer. They would not receive that. And so we began, thanks to one of the island of excellence in Brazil, the Butantan Institute from the state of São Paulo, which produced our first vaccine. So we could begin the vaccine almost 2 months after the rest of the world got the vaccination. So I think that it's not a rejection of a type of science. It's a rejection of, I understand like that, but I can be wrong. And it's not including, I think, the right, even the people who voted Bolsonaro are not so irrational like that. So this is against everything that do not, because I know that earth planners in the United States have some principles, biblical and religious, theological, and a whole set of scientific ideas. But not even that. Bolsonaro is not able to deal, including to this kind. The pastors he sent to the Minister of Education were disgusting, to put it in a delicate form, because they are just thieves. It's terrible, the scene we saw, and I was close to that, and it was terrible, because these people, and including the minister he put there, they were there just to get money. The minister printed Bibles with his photo and distributed all along Brazil, just to give an example of what was the, and even having a very structured bureaucracy, all the positions were tied to obey to these crazy orders.
Maria, I'm going to have to stop you there. This is really fascinating, particularly for those of us who sit outside of this and have no concept of what's happening. So I mean, it has been fascinating, but I'm conscious we need to stick to time. So I'm going to bring Anna in, and obviously if we've got time at the end, Maria, I think we will be picking your brains in terms
Claire
of just
is there.
understanding sort of some more of the context, and welcome Claire as well. So Anna, it's over to you if you want to share your screen. And with this, you've got 20 minutes, and again, I'll give you a 3-minute warning when we get to time.
Hello, thank you. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Maria Lígia, Rafael, and Claire too. Thank you so much for your attention, and it's very nice to be here to this presentation. It's very important to us. I ask for your patience because my English is not very good. I work hard to do this. I will thank you so much. First of all, I would like to highlight in Maria Lígia's speech the importance of studies and analysis on the dynamics of extreme right in the world. Bolsonaro is just one case, but it's very important to be attention for this case. Thanks so much. This paper is about factors related to the permanence of students in evening courses at University of Brasília, Brazil, between 2015 and 2019. This is our research team. I am Ana Maria de Albuquerque Moreira. Our research team, we take part of NESUB, a Center for Studies in Higher Education at University of Brasília. And I particularly, I am so glad because I take part also with Maria Lígia in CELAP. I don't know what's happened with this. It's not, sorry, it's not changing. Okay. Yes. Here, our research objectives, the aims of this study. This paper discusses the factors related to the permanence of students in evening degree courses at University of Brasília in Brazil. There are today many courses at night, but our study was about the courses that prepare teachers for primary and secondary education, training teachers for primary and secondary education. We aimed to identify the main factors that influence the permanence of students in these courses and analyze and compare these factors in the perception of former students, both graduates and non-graduates, and suggestions, provide input for the development of strategies to retain these students at university. This is a big problem for our university. So the importance of the study, the social impact is the first one. The retention, the permanence of these student evening courses at UNB is extremely important for the social and economic inclusions of these students. The social responsibility of the university. The focus of the study was the 15 evening courses at UNB that prepare teachers for primary and secondary education. So it's very important to link university to basic education in Brazil. And institutional policies policies to reduce the high dropout rate in these courses, which reach 50% of enrollments. The methodology of the study, the theoretical methodological framework, includes factors of permanence, institutional policies, and support students, and predictive characteristics of dropout. The factors covered in the research includes student profiles, pre-university school trajectory, choice of the course, the university course, self-regulation, self-efficacy, engagement, academic environment, assistance actions, qualifying actions, and the satisfaction with the course, the theoretical frameworks. We conducted a quantitative research with institutional data and online surveys applied to graduates and non-graduates in even courses between 2015 and 2019. We stopped in 2019 because of the COVID that changed the rules to stay at the university. And the data was analyzed using descriptive statistics. The scope of the analysis included 255 graduates and 296 non-graduates, as valid case. But at all, we have a lot. We have, in fact, so many students. I'm sorry, we have 1,573 students that graduate, and 2,394 students who don't conclude the courses, because we have to combine the institutional data with the answers to the online surveys. Thank you so much. We have a lot of data, and I tried to summarize it here, the results. Students' profile. Graduates, women were the most of them. Two groups. Then in the two groups, graduates and non-graduates, we are always speaking about graduates and non-graduates. In the two groups, graduates and non-graduates, graduates who concluded the course and non-graduates, the students who drop out. In the two groups, whites were the most. It was, I think, the period we studied, because today we have more Black at the university, and the parents' education lower than higher education, 16%, and the origin of public schools. Form of admission, the university entrance exam, most of them graduates and non-graduates, and the majority did not choose teacher training as their first core choice. It's important to say that teacher training courses in Brazil are not very prestigious course, and the student didn't choose them as the first option to go to university. Students, and important to say, they studied at night. The students' experience at university. They think the two groups being at UNB was a positive factor for former students, and non-graduates faced more difficulties in social relationships and being in a university environment free of discrimination than the graduates. More results about the graduates. We have student assistance actions, and the graduates participated more of this student assistant action, like these ones: permanent grant, scholarship for language study, a voucher to use to buy books of the university, publisher, housing aid, socioeconomic aid, emergency aid, and food aid. The graduates have more support to be at university. And I have to say, it's because they study at night. They are evening courses, and most of them work all the day. And when they work, they have a salary. They don't have guarantees to take part of these programs. And we have também academic activities at university beyond teacher. And in the two groups, there was low engagement of these studies, these evening studies in these academic activities, monitoring, scientific projects, tutorial education programs, different actions in academic beyond teachers. But despite of this, we can see that the graduates take more participation than the non-graduates. Okay, and where we are going. Sorry, the university, the students, the graduates and non-graduates, 73% of them were working at the time of leaving the course. The graduates completed the course and non-graduates, but all of them were working, 73 of them. And the 37 of non-graduates were working more than 40 hours a week. It's important because it takes it's a very important difference when they to stay and or leave university. So we asked in the study what factors contributed or not to the permanence in evening degree courses at UNB in the perception of former students, both graduates and non-graduates in this period. Findings about graduates. Sorry, with the slide repeated. Relevant to complete. They said that what was relevant to complete the course and not relevant to complete the course. We have a lot of data, and I tried to summarize it. The family support, first, the relevance to complete the course. The family support was relevant, good professional perspectives, and support from professors. So professors are very important in the academic trajectory of these studies, these students at the university, in the university. That what was not relevant to complete the course. Solidarity from colleagues, being at an academic program, receiving students assistance. They didn't receive so much student assistance, the assistance action aid, and they think it was not relevant. Findings about non-graduates. These are more important to us to understand why they drop out of the course. And relevant to drop out, and we consider they're relevant to drop out and not relevant to drop out. Relevant to drop out was reconciling work and study. We remember, they work and they work hard, more than 40 hours a week. So organize time for studies. And emotional difficulties and dismotivation was important to drop out, and reconciling study and family responsibilities, because they are older than other students. The students who made the course and all the day, they are older, and much of them have family and work and so much responsibilities, and they have to reconcile work and students. But it was not relevant to drop out. Access to study materials, difficulties with contents, financial conditions because they work, and going to university. It was not a problem for them. Okay, the problem was this time for study, and we highlighted the course, the structure of the course. Conclusions of our study, achievements. The retaining data shows that promoting student retention should be a priority for the UNB, the university. And the student finds we need for institutional efforts to reduce dropout rates in evening degree courses. These efforts should focus on developing policies and align with the profile of working students and improving infrastructure, pedagogical conditions, and curriculum innovations. By addressing these factors, the university can enhance the success and retention of its evening degree courses. We need this and the constant struggle by creating conditions for students to stay in their course. The UNB fulfills its role as an institution fighting for social inclusion. It's very important for the university for his social responsibility. So thank you. It was so quickly because I was worried with time with my English. So thank you so much.
You were fine, Anna, and you even have a couple of minutes to spare, so well done.
Yes.
So I have a couple of questions.
It was it very quickly because I tried.
It wasn't. You didn't speed through it. This pace was absolutely fine, and your timing was spot on. So well done. I had a couple of questions, and again, it's born out of ignorance in terms of not knowing the educational setup in Brazil. But I wondered in terms of, you know, how that evening course was being delivered. Is it being delivered in person or online?
In person. These studies were in person because it was before the pandemic COVID. These were in-person courses.
Okay.
In person.
Yeah, and then you said obviously it was primary and secondary teachers. So in the sample that you had, was it a mixture and primary and secondary were both equally presented, or was there any you know, skew towards one group of teachers over another?
No, I try to understand. One course, Pedagogia, here, it was for primary and primary schools. The
so
other courses
primary.
were maths, teacher of maths, physician Portuguese language, English language, geography, history. These were teachers for secondary schools, secondary schools. And this all of these 15 courses work with this aim to form teachers for basic education. And the dropout rates are very high in these courses.
And in Brazil,
at night and day, but at night we have courses. Sorry, we have these courses. Day courses, I'm not sure if you can understand. Day courses and night evening courses. We study the evening courses because in the evening courses we have more the high dropout rates, more than 50.
Yeah. And is teaching a regulated profession in Brazil? Do you have to have, you know, sort of in the UK, you have to be a member of the General Teaching Council in order to be a teacher in the school sector? Does that work in Brazil as well, that there's a registration process for teachers?
No, we don't have a federal system for basic education. But Brazil have 27, it's like district states, and which of one has his own system of basic education. Okay, and this teacher for basic education, the university form a teacher for basic education, then they go to here in Brasilia, University Brasilia is in the capital, the federal district, and these students, when they conclude the course, they can go to the system of basic education of federal district, or they can move for another state in Brazil, another province. They can go to another way. But a problem, Maria Lígia knows it because we discussed this so much of them, unfortunately, don't go to the schools, to the basic education. They go to other work because, I said, it's not, they are not prestigious course, and it's not a prestigious profession today in Brazil. I think today, no, for a long history, it's not very attractive. Can you understand me? For the students, and they are not attractive courses. As you know, most of them didn't choose training courses as first choice to be at university.
Maria Ligia, did you want to come in with a question? Yeah.
Yes, if I can, just a minute, because I think the study, I knew the study of Ana Maria. She's now working with us at CELAPS. What I think is important is that what we call licenciatura in Brazil, which means all programs for teacher training, in Brazil in different areas, is emerged as an important problem in the analysis of social inclusion in our higher education system, because it's the course where we have evening courses. Most of the enrollment is in distance education. This year, it passed 90% of enrollment in teaching programs for teaching formation, and women and poor students and Black students. So it emerged in our analysis at the CELAPS as one of the main lines for inclusion, and at the same time, it is not working well as a preparation for improving quality in basic education, because the students who get the better achievement, the highest achievement at the end of the courses, do not come to the system as teachers. They become principals or supervisors, or they go to their technical area. For instance, instead of giving chemistry classes, they became techniques in chemistry in the industry, because it pays better salaries. So it's a very important focus of analysis in higher education systems inclusion.
Yeah, because it's cyclical, because that will impact who you get then as students is based on what education they've had in the early years prior to university. And so there's a kind of cyclical. If those students that you've upskilled then come out of the system, then that impacts the education that's going on at school level, and therefore the students that you then get. So yeah, it's sad that they're not staying. But
yes, and another thing that is saddest, even sadder, is that most of those who enter the courses do not finish them. So it is a tragedy, to put it mildly. It's a tragedy, because it is more than, it's about 40% of the students that enter would finish the course.
Yeah, sorry, I had a problem with my internet, sorry. Yes, this is a big problem. Maria Ligia is highlighting this. It's a very problem. It's a big problem for us in Brazil. In fact, we don't have teachers enough to the basic education.
Yeah.
And after this study, the university's changes, it made some changes for more mental health assistance program, and more academic activities, offering more academic activities at evening, at night, for the evening courses. Because a problem what was the students, they work all the day, they go to university, and they didn't find other academic activities like seminar, research, and other activity that motivate them to study. And now we are having more, the university is offering more academic activities for the students of the evening courses, especially the licenciaturas,
Thank
the
you.
training teachers programs.
We've got a couple of minutes left, so I don't know if Raphael or Claire have got a question for Anna.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ana Maria. It's very interesting. I am about to talk about this kind of research that you have conducted, and the impact it has on leveling. So I have 1,000 questions to ask you, but I would like I think I would like to ask you, I think that most factors that you present are student factors, though they seem to be some of those related to mostly teachers. And I read while you were talking, I read your paper, and I saw that you quote Vincent Tinto's work, the one from 1975 and the one from 2012. I would like to ask you if you have found other explaining factors, non-student factors, maybe teaching practices, maybe curriculum construction, especially because of the last paragraph, when you say that, well, I don't remember textually, but the institutional practices need to address the specific student profile. What kind of adaptation would you imagine relating to such a student profile?
Yes, Rafael, thank you for your question. Yes, we found, and we found these problems with teachers, the governance, the management of the courses, because we have coordinators for the course. We found problems in teacher profile, but they were not so expressive than these ones, they said. We asked them, but we are working in this. When I say pedagogical conditions and curriculum innovation, that the curriculum must, the teachers and the curriculum must to observe the characteristics of these students. They are students and workers at the same time. They work more than 73% of them work, and the non-graduates work a lot, for 40 hours, more than 40 hours a week. So sometimes people say, oh, the university is not the place for these students. And we say, yes, the university, when the university must begins to open its doors to these students, the workers students, the university must see their characteristics. Can you understand me? It's important for curricular innovation, look to the student profile. This is important.
Thank you, Anna.
To be a very more attractive course.
Thank you, Anna. And at that point, we'll stop, and I'm going to hand over to Raphael for the last presentation in this particular section. So over to you, Raphael.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Can you see my presentation?
Yep, it's up. Thank you, Raphael.
Thank you very much. So Well, the paper I'm about to present is about leveling as a remedial educational strategy in Latin American higher education, which is fundamentally focused on non-traditional students. I'm using a very broad description of others, no, other groups not usually overrepresented in higher education. And especially in some countries like Chile, where I'm studying my PhD, leveling is a part, the last chain of affirmative action policies. So this is a strategy that is usually presented as related to social justice issues. And it is actually focused on a broad diversity of social groups underrepresented, mostly because they have experienced access inequities based on class, on gender, on race, and disability. And Latin America has a broad diversity of other groups. I'm going to focus broadly on that. Now, the main focus of this research at this stage is about the production of leveling from a network of collaboration between teaching, management, and research within the university. And I will attempt to light up this network very schematically in order to illustrate how I have found a complex network within the university, but also in order to present a more complex way of researching leveling within the university. So, well, first I would like to take up the results of the previous stage of this research, which I presented last year in this conference, and I published in a Chilean journal. And in this article, I show a broad leveling problem within Latin American higher education to address gaps and slopes of performance as objects of intervention. So a gap would be a lack of verticality. It involves the definition of a certain minimum level of required performance right at the beginning, and which places in the lower end the leveling subject. So this is a scheme in which the subjects who perform higher than the required performance are silenced. They are not intervened. They are constructed as normal or high performers. But this is also a logic of assessment, because it makes possible to construct a minimum required performance. It could be a test score, and everyone below such score would be placed as a leveling subject, as an underperformer. There's also another metaphor, a metaphor of slopes, which is rather a certain lack of horizontality. And a form, in a way, it is a comparison between a certain normal or traditional students, which symbolically places the non-traditional students as a leveling subject because they perform lower than their normal or traditional peers. So this would be a scheme of constructing below average or certain lower percentile of performance as the leveling subject. Consequently, the lower levels of gaps and slopes would be the objects of intervention. And from these assessment schemes, the leveling subject is actually individualized as the one in the lower end. But symbolically, this is also an issue of social gaps, which is sustained by leveling discourses that is fundamentally produced from the university. It is we, the university actors, who construct these strategies, and we are also the ones who have the greatest authority to problematize the marginalization of broad social groups from the university. And it is usually problematized as something engendered before and outside the university. So here is where a recurrent symbolic violence in which we may participate as leveling professionals, we place the origin context of non-traditional students and the secondary educational system as a place where inequity in access is actually being engendered. And these leveling discourses depicts secondary education, especially poor secondary education systems, as of low quality, as a place of inequity, as the social origin of these gaps to close. So this is a scarcity strategy in which the university reinforces its superiority in terms of quality and capacity, and even a certain moral superiority, as the university would redress the inequality engendered in the educational system. This is also a certain blueprint of leveling, in which from initial diagnosis, first-year students will be directed towards a 1 or a 0 level according to their entry performance. This is a potentially segregation scheme within the university. However, such possibility would depend on the institutional arrangements and regulations in different countries. For example, in countries in certain universities of Colombia and Ecuador, a rigid scheme of mandatory 0-level courses for low performance would be in place. But rather in places like Chile, supplementary leveling strategies are broadly implemented, given that such segregation would be illegal. So in such case, the 0 level is a place where enrichment is being constructed for the leveling subject's initial trajectory. So the broad purpose of this research is to rather unblack box leveling as a dispositive. This is an image that I found a few years ago for another presentation in the midst of the pandemic confinement. What I would like to illustrate here is that in general, leveling tends to be associated with a certain subject and their profile as a self-evident truth of what or how the leveling subject is. But such technological construction tends to naturalize its constructed nature. The practices we allow to measure and rank student expected outcomes in order to intervene their initial trajectory. So once each student's chance of dropout is calculated, a construction has already operated right after admission, which involves policies, actors, expertise, discourses, technologies, and rationalities. So this is what led me to consider leveling as a dispositive, to study as a dispositive. And if we imagine ourselves in the vantage point of the person holding this device, it's very likely that we can confuse the student with their profile. So this is an exercise of moving a little bit to the side, or maybe trying to go around this whole evaluation scheme. I suggest we need to dislocate the visual coincidence between the student and his or her profile. So this image opened up a research idea. So from very simple guiding questions, such as where, what, how, for what, who, I started to address the construction, and this has methodologically been a very slow research project, an ethnographic immersion, which coincides with my transition from the professional position and identity working in these places to the place where I'm now, just finishing my PhD research about affirmative action policies in Chilean higher education. So I moved from questions of what does it mean or how it's problematized. But the idea of construction allowed me to engage with the production of leveling and the entanglement of discursive and non-discursive practices. The first stage was a rather documentary analysis focused on the notion of problematization from a large corpus of journal and conference papers from Latin American universities. More recently, I also began to interview leveling professionals in children affirmative action programs. And in this space is actually where leveling is changed with equity quotas to construct the inclusion subject immediately as a leveling subject. And from 2023, this has turned into some kind of institutional ethnography, to the extent that I chose to engage with the perspective of the professionals who work in the leveling process. So this has led me to quite unexpected instances of discussion with my colleagues in talks, congresses, and other kinds of participatory activities about what leveling means to us and how we enact this part of affirmative action policies. Well, I am going to show you very schematically this network of production of leveling, of the leveling dispositive. And I'm going to try to show a multiplicity of elements and spaces which coordinate within the university for constructing such a specific strategy. The first is that in general, leveling is a new teaching space in Latin American higher education, which is strongly linked to certain courses which are described as critical, insofar they have high failure rates. However, the explanation of why these courses fail so many students is usually a game of higher and lower ends of several breaches, several gaps. So they are discursively constructed first as being highly difficult, and also of students being underprepared for such courses. Also, the knowledges of higher education are assumed to be higher, more difficult than the secondary educational knowledges. And here I'm trying to describe a certain common sense of why these courses fail so many students. So this game of high levels as something we need to defend and lower levels as something we need to intervene leads that leveling is not actually placed over these courses, but over the low performers in these courses. And this is actually happening mostly on learning support centers, which are not located within faculty, but outside. However, the individualization of the leveling subject comes from diagnosis, comes from different assessment technologies, which assume that certain individual factors need to be assessed. The main goal here is to construct a certain student profile from institutional definitions. And that means we decide as institutions what to measure in order to first predict and then to prevent student dropout. So there's a definition of what needs to be measured. And this comes from these very popular now early warning systems, which not only will assess student profiles right at the beginning, but will continue to monitor student performance through their first years. So we assume that there are certain individual explaining factors, such as mathematical knowledge, or maybe some psychosocial factors, such as the socio-economical level. And we have dropout models that are mostly used to estimate the probability of dropout of each student. But this comes from retention studies, mostly from US retention studies. These studies legitimize that dropout models as regression models are useful to estimate the probability of dropout. And these retention studies also legitimize that certain factors and not others would explain the dropout. But also we have fields such as learning assessment and specific didactics that legitimize the way of measuring how much each student has learned and how to make such measurements valid. So in sum, I am trying to light up a specific network of production of leveling in 3 broad spaces. First, teaching, which is mostly done outside faculty by non-departmentalized teachers and even peer tutors. We have also management, dropout management, with early warning systems and student assessment is being constructed. And we also have research, but specific research. These are not all retention studies, for instance. These are those retention studies that show how to measure the probability of student dropout and what factors would explain that. This is not, for instance, I mentioned a few minutes ago, Vincent Tinto's work. This is not the research that shows what good teaching or curricular practices would foster student retention. This is the research that makes possible to differentiate certain type of students of others in order to make them eventually leveling subjects.
Raphael, you've got 2 minutes left.
Thank you. My final thoughts. Well, first, in order to adumbrate the constructed nature of the leveling problems, I would say that the objects of the leveling problems are gaps and slopes, and the subjects are non-traditional students and low performers. And the sites where this is being conducted are supplementary support centers for critical courses. The effects of this construction is first to construct paradoxically the non-traditional subjects as carrying lacks, as having something they do not have. And this leads to othering and responsabilization practices, which make the non-traditional subject responsible for their own inclusion, which also helps to secure and unproblematize institutional practices and conditions such as teaching, regular teaching, or curricular construction. So I said this is a research problem. My future research agenda in leveling is to actually conduct an ethnography within at least one university to sort of reverse engineer from the leveling teaching arena the construction of all these technologies, which will allow to understand how admission and leveling are connected. So that is my work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Raphael. I'll get you to stop sharing your screen and we'll see if you've got questions for the audience, because I think our audience has grown over this last presentation. So colleagues, have you got questions for Raphael? Raphael, I have a question, because it looked like a lot of your work, you were looking at previous literature, is that correct? In this field and using that for your modelling, and you've been looking at retention studies you mentioned there. Is it too early yet for you to kind of think about the what next, or are you starting to have those conversations with colleagues in your own institutions about, you know, that aspect of it? You now know who is most likely to maybe come out of the system, and you've recognised what the challenges are, but the next stage is, right, well, what do we do to address that? Or is that too early? I don't want to sort of, you know, leap ahead with your studies and things. So what's next for you?
Well, I didn't explain, because this is a parallel research project of my PhD thesis, which is about affirmative action. So it has been slow because I have my thesis. I have to finish my PhD. I have had many opportunities to talk with my colleagues, people that I knew for years, about these research findings. And it has been really, really exciting, because at first I received a response about showing that this deficit is very real. And I have to convince them that I'm not trying to show that as false, that I'm trying to unpack a broader problem. And that has been really, really interesting. When I have interviewed colleagues, the first description of the problem to be solved has been about the access of unprepared students, which is, I would say, the leveling cliché. However, after a few minutes talking about what other things are involved here, I start to hear about unprepared teachers, pedagogically, for instance. Too many students in the classes, too many content in the curriculum, and you start to unpack a much more complex problem. And so that has been really, really interesting. But effectively, it has been very intense, because sometimes I present this in front of people who defend their work, their leveling work. So we are effectively attached to the things that we construct within the university. And sometimes critique is read as trying to destruct that. But most of the time, leveling professionals are very excited to open up the problem, and to also to acknowledge that they cannot fix everything within the university, and helping directly a student is the most realistic way of approaching the problem, because there's a very strong micropolitics within the university that one professional cannot fix. So when I ask them, for instance, what do you imagine that should happen in order that we don't need any more leveling within the university? And when they answer that, they say, okay, let's dream, let's fix the world. They feel it as a huge, huge problem. And that connects with my experience working as a leveling coordinator. You try to fix as much as you can, and to help the student directly is the most simple way of approaching it. But we know that this is a systemic problem.
Thank you very much. We've got just about time for the last couple of questions. So Maria Leger, first of all.
Thank you, Rafael. I loved to see your presentation. And I would just recommend you to read a book from one of my students on the permanence. I think you read Portuguese. It's not a problem for Spanish-speaking people. His name is Eduardo Borges, and he worked on how the bureaucrats deal with the students that enter the university by the quota system, the quota entry. And so something he noted is that the financial support is important, psychosocial support is very important, but most of all, pedagogical support is one of the most important. And I think you came just to the point. It's interesting because you mentioned that you try to not to put the responsibility on the shoulders of the student, because it's an institutional question, as you asked Anna about that. And I think this is a fair way of dealing with it. I would ask just something very punctual. You said about teaching, that teachers, many teachers are teaching distance courses. It's something like that. And second, Professor Cristóbal Villalobos from PUC Chile is working with us in CELAPES. He is the researcher from Chile who is working with us. And he mentioned the help that is called gratuidade, which is freeness. I don't know how, tuition-free program.
Yes.
And I would ask you if this was important for your students.
Oh, thank you, Maria Ligia. Yes, absolutely. I know the work of Cristobal. He's a huge inspiration in my thesis, by the way.
He's a very
yes.
good researcher, I think.
He's a very, very interesting sociologist. Yes, I read many things he writes. You have these learning centers which are not part of the faculty, which are on the side, supplementary projects.
Okay.
The problem with that is that non-traditional students are being redirected towards such places. And so within the regular courses, the critical courses, we don't really have many adaptations for low performance.
Okay.
For non-traditional students, more in a US approach, I mean, adult students, for instance, if they are also working students, if they have kids or other responsibilities, you have their regular curriculum and the leveling on the side. So that is a huge problem because it does not address the actual profile, as Ana Maria said, or I imagine from what she said, of the working class student. About gratuidad, yes, gratuity is actually a scholarship in which the state pays the fees for certain students. So many of us are not very happy with that name because it's not free. The universities in Chile, every university in Chile still charges a fee, but for certain students, the state pays. However, that has been a huge, huge relief in not assuming student debt.
Thank you. I'm conscious we've only got a minute left before we need to go back into the main room. But Ana Maria, either a short question or comment?
Yes, Rafael, thank you for your presentation. In CELAP, we are studying Chile. You have been studying Chile in special paths. And I think in countries as Brazil and Chile with deep social gaps, and it's very difficult, the right to access higher education to these studies, né? And permanence, the retention of these studies. And so I think our study and your study have important dialogue. And I will ask you something, and especially because we studied a paper from Alberto Hurtado, creio que é esta universidade, no? The important work about, the author was Daniela Duran. We studied very much about Alberto Hurtado and PAS in Alberto.
I know her, yeah.
Do you know? Yes, I like it very much. And I would like to ask you, do you think was PAS an important program to reduce the social gap? PAS has impacts for the retention of the students, the performance of the students at the university when after they enter in the university, because we know it's a problem, and PAS has impacts in this. And I think it's all, because I would like to talk with you and Ligia all the day, but it's impossible.
Rafael, I'm going to have to ask you to keep it very brief in terms of response. I'm so sorry about that, but I just conscious of the time.
It's really interesting.
Because I think Alberto Hurtado, and so sorry, and Alberto Hurtado has an important program to monitor students.
I know. Yeah, I know. My PhD thesis is exactly about that, about PASE. I would say that PASE has reduced very, very mildly a socioeconomic gap. However, discursively, it has been celebrated as a huge policy, because it's the first public policy for affirmative action in higher education in Chile. So if you look at the numbers, about 3% of students of the most selective universities came from PASE. And that is a very small quota. However, it's the first quota that we have. So there's a contradiction there here. And also, I would like to say that some universities are more selective, very highly selective. And in those, the PASE student, the equity quota student, is academically very different from the normal students. However, in universities like Alberto Hurtado, and actually remember the thesis of Daniela, tries to show that the equity quota student is very similar to the regular student. So there's a lower gap. So underlying this problem, there's the problem of selectivity.
Yes.
And on that note, I'm going to have to call it to a close. And thank you so much. It's been absolutely fascinating. Could ask lots and lots of questions, and I'm very grateful for the insights that you've provided, certainly for me, into the education system in Latin America. So thank you for that. And as it's great that you've all made connections as well. So on that note, I will pull it all to a close. And as I say, closing remarks are taking place in the other room. So hopefully see you in that other room in a couple of minutes. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye for now.
Bye. 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 Rafael. Bye, Lígia.
Bye.
Bye.